It's another week, another set of bad actors, malicious files, and compromised systems. On today's show, we're going to be talking about some of the cutting-edge intel being shared by our awesome community in the LimaCharlie Slack channel, and a huge thank you to all those folks that take the time to share their knowledge with the rest of us. If you enjoy listening in on these intel chats and aren't in our community Slack channel, then you should join the conversation. Much more information than we can get through on the show is being shared there, and you will get it in real time. You can join the Slack channel at slack.limacharlie.io. And as always, for these chats, I'm joined by the one and only Matt Bromley. How are you doing today, Matt?
There he is. Chris, what's going on, sir? I'm doing well, man. I'm doing well. Thank you for asking, as always. I appreciate the ability and the opportunity to have these weekly check-ins with you. I think not only do we get a chance to talk about some cool stuff happening out there in the cybercrime world or cybersecurity world or whatnot, but I also get a chance to check in with you and see how you're doing. And it's a blessing every week to be here. You know, we're in the final throes of 2024 here, right? Our first December recording. And I think the holiday season, the new year, and everything is starting to set in with like, all right, let's go. Let's get those goals in. Let's get it all done. And sure enough, there's plenty of threat actors who apparently feel the same way, which we'll talk about today. But I wanted to give you a chance to talk about one of the awesome things that you do at the end of every year in the name of giving back.
Yeah, so I don't know when this recording will come out. It'll probably be in a couple days, but today, December 3rd, is Giving Tuesday, and that marks the first day of the Cybersecurity Cares yearly fundraising effort that we spearhead here at LimaCharlie. It involves a bunch of companies and different defenders from around the industry. We get together for 2 weeks and we raise money in support of different causes. This year, we are supporting Becky's Fund, which is helps in the fight against domestic violence. Last year, we raised $28,000. This year, we're hoping to do more. I think in the first few hours, we're already at $1,600. So off to a great start. Everything will be wrapping up with a full day streamathon on December 19th. We're going to have a bunch of different musical acts, people from across the industry, and just see how far we can take it this year. So I also want to give a big shout out to some of the companies that have already made commitments for support. We haven't seen all the checks yet, but I have no doubt that they're coming through. Thank you to, of course, LimaCharlie for allowing me the time and resources to make this stuff happen. Big shout out to Jim McMurray from threathunter.ai. He's been a supporter for years. Awesome company, awesome guy. Same with Brandon Poole from Panopsy Security, Gene Yu from Black Panda, Paul Imey, Glenn Starkman, and all the awesome team from Soteria, and our new friend Oliver from Aspiron Search. So thank you folks for putting your money where your heart is and helping us to make a difference. If you want to get involved or learn more or attend the telethon, you can do so at cybersecurity-cares.com. That's cybersecurity-cares.com. And I think with that, we're just ready to dive into the stuff.
Let's talk about some international news.
There we go. Yeah. The first one, I always like to start with what I'm calling the Schadenfreude files. Although this one does feel a little heavy. Russian courts have sentenced Stanislav Moiseyev, the leader of the Hydra dark web marketplace, to life imprisonment. Hydra was once the largest darknet platform globally for illicit activities such as drug sales and money laundering, boasting 19,000 seller accounts and 17 million customers. Moiseyev and his 15 accomplices, who received sentences ranging from 8 to 23 years, operated across Russia, Belarus between 2015 and 2018. Authorities seized nearly a ton of narcotics, as well as assets and equipment used for drug production and distribution. The platform's reach extended far beyond drugs. Hydra facilitated transactions for stolen data, forged documents, and hacking services, generating over 1.35 billion with a B in 2020 alone. It also operated as a Bitcoin bank mixer designed to anonymize cryptocurrency transactions and evade law enforcement detection. The marketplace was ultimately dismantled in April 2022 through a joint operation by German and US authorities who confiscated servers and 543 Bitcoins valued at $51 million at the time. I wonder what those are worth now.
I got to say, it's one of those things where, about your mention of Bitcoin. So I've been on this thing, not just me, I think globally, but in the past near a month or so, let's just be frank, ever since the US election was determined, cryptocurrency has been kind of on just a tear. Bitcoins approaching $100,000 a piece. And, there's all sorts of other rises and big gains and stuff like that. There's nothing to attribute it to that I'm aware of. I'm just going to say that it's happened, right?
Mhm.
And Chris, the first thing I always think about whenever I see like Bitcoin going on a tear is I think back to the day when Bitcoin was like $600 a coin. And I remember working ransomware cases back in the day, and someone was like, please send 3 Bitcoin totaling $1,800 to unlock your files. And I remember just thinking to myself, like, could you imagine that there's some threat actor somewhere who like 10, 12 years ago probably was able to scrape like, 10 to 20 Bitcoin. Someone was like, oh yeah, $5,000, good job, And now that person's sitting on a couple million of just hanging out of just fun money just by running some stupid ransomware code 10 years ago. That's the first place where my head goes whenever I think about the value of cryptocurrency now. But more related to the current matter, 15 accomplices, life sentences, ton of narcotics, assets, equipment, $1.35 billion in facilitated transactions. I mean, it's another Silk Road almost that we're looking at right here. In fact, it probably is another Silk Road where we're talking about a dark web marketplace. We're talking about, the thing is, it's the types of activities, the types of contraband and stuff that's traded in here, folks. This isn't a joke, right? This isn't just like, oh, let me find a way to send marijuana through the mail or something like that, right? This is drug sales, significant narcotic sales. This is money laundering. If I remember correctly, a lot of times these dark websites also facilitate things like, sometimes they facilitate like injuries, assassinations, and stuff
Human
like that.
trafficking.
Human trafficking of all sorts and kinds of ages and things like that. And it gets really bad really quickly. And like, I don't know, maybe a life sentence isn't enough for this guy. I'm not really too sure because there's some awful stuff that transpires through this here. And I'm just glad to see that, every time we read or we talk about kind of combined coalition with global law forces coming together and stuff like that, I love seeing this type of stuff happen. I really do. I love seeing these type of people put behind bars because, even though this person may have just organized a marketplace that served as a facilitation for things to happen, I think, unfortunately, a lot of bad guys try to pretend like that's hands-off activity. I just run the marketplace. I don't control the sellers and that kind of stuff. And it's like, no, man, you create a forum for this stuff to happen. You're absolutely as guilty as they do. It's almost like you watch all these crimes happen. You have the server logs. You're receiving the transactions, and then you step back and say, oh, I'm innocent. No.
And how much of this crime? How much of this crime wouldn't be able to be possible without these kind of marketplaces, right? So even though they're not directly involved in the crime, by facilitating it, they do take ownership of it. And yeah, at first I thought the life sentence seemed heavy, but as I read into the article and see how big and wide the impact of this dark web marketplace was, I don't feel sorry for the guy. I am sure he'll have lots of time to think about what he did.
Well, he'll be in jail with 15 of his friends. They can sit around and talk about how great it was to get those Bitcoins back then, I guess. I would like to note that the organizer was sentenced to life imprisonment, and he received a fine of 4 million rubles. I'm not really too sure what 4 million rubles translates to, but I'm just going to say if you recovered $51 million worth of Bitcoins, maybe you got a payment. Like maybe you got your money back a little bit, right? I'm not sure what 4 million rubles translates to, but I think you got your money back. Okay, I apologize. According to the most recent currency translator I can find, that's approximately $38,000 US dollars. That's a paltry fine compared to what this guy was doing. So let's up the fines, use the Bitcoins, and see a little more of that revenue. $1.35 billion transpired in 2020 alone. I think there's more money to be taken here.
Sure. Yeah. So this case is notable for the Russian government's rare crackdown on domestic criminals, which often evade prosecution as long as they avoid targeting Russian interests. Hydra has also drawn international attention, with the U.S. Treasury Department sanctioning its operations and linking it to over 100 cryptocurrency addresses used in illegal transactions. The sentencing follows broader efforts to curb Russian cybercrime, including recent arrests of other high-profile hackers and ransomware affiliates operating under aliases like Wazawaka. These actions indicate a potential shift in Russia's approach to digital criminal enterprises. Yeah, it's funny to see Russia, and maybe this is from before the Ukraine conflict, but interesting to see how on one stage they sort of seem aligned against the rest of the world, and then on this front can be seen to starting to cooperate more. So geopolitics are interesting and apparently very complicated.
And I'll add the note in here for anyone who caught the tail end of that as well. A ransomware suspect was arrested in Russia. Actually, yesterday, the news was reported, so it's probably a day or two ago. And this individual, Mikhail Matveev, I'm probably mispronouncing that. Let me just go by his alias of Wazawaka, because apparently he's a Muppets fan. I'm not really too sure what to make of that. But it was an affiliate of ransomware groups such as Conti, DarkSide, and Lockbit. So these are the terms that we're a little bit more familiar with. And there was a $10 million US reward on his head for that. So I kind of chuckle to myself a little bit, Chris, not because this guy wrote ransomware, but because someone had to type up the wanted poster that said reward, $10 million US, serious, AKA Wazawaka. And those things happen, but nonetheless, he got arrested. So go collect your $10 million and your 4 million ruble fine.
All right. Next up, the U.S. Commerce Department has expanded its export controls, adding nearly 140 Chinese technology companies to its entity list. This action primarily targets firms involved in the production of computer chips, chip-making tools, and related software, including Chinese-owned entities operating in Japan, South Korea, and Singapore. The updated regulations aim to restrict China's access to high-bandwidth memory chips essential for advanced applications like artificial intelligence, citing national security concerns. The inclusion on the entity list implies that U.S. companies will likely face denied export licenses when dealing with these firms. China's Commerce Ministry has condemned the U.S. actions, labeling them as economic coercion. These measures are part of a broader strategy by the Biden administration to enhance U.S. semiconductor manufacturing capabilities while limiting China's technological advancements, particularly in sectors with potential military applications. Again, we're touching on these geopolitical issues, and they're big.
I'm assuming there's probably a world of people where this didn't come as too much of a surprise. Before anyone thinks too much in this, I don't think this is preparation for any, I'm going to call it ongoing, the hyperbole about tariffs and stuff like that that's been going around. This actually aligned a little bit more with the Biden administration, looking to manufacture and put investments in semiconductor manufacturing inside the United States. So I think this might just be actually kind of like normal, like the course of international business, if you will, as someone tries to put pressure. You put a little pressure on the scale and hoping that something else happens. And who knows, it's a complex world that's out there. However, I do find it interesting kind of with, and speaking as a U.S. citizen, there's about a month and a half left in the presidency. I'm curious to see, and maybe we revisit this again in late January, early February, of just how long these types of things last, or how much of this is a precursor for what might be a big shift in import-export controls, especially out of China in the future. So without us turning this into a geopolitical discussion, which most of these things end up being, honestly, I would say right now there's probably a little bit of pushing and shoving around, like everyone's just trying to find their place as things happen. And I think this aligns with what we expected the Biden administration to do.
Yeah. I'm about a third of the way through a book called Chip War. And it's fascinating, the history of the microprocessor development, the move to Asia, and how complicated and fragile the whole supply chain is. And so the Biden administration is trying to create more stability for U.S. access to these technologies by bringing chip manufacturing back into the States, which is having all kinds of knock-on effects. So in response, China has imposed restrictions on exporting critical chip-making materials to the U.S., such as gallium, germanium, and antimony. Sounds like the stuff that Wolverine's bones are made out of. Citing its own national security concerns, this move directly counters U.S. sanctions and is expected to impact the global semiconductor supply chain, given China's dominant position in producing these essential materials. The escalating trade tensions have also affected financial markets. Shares of companies like NVIDIA experienced fluctuations due to concerns over the new U.S. restrictions. However, the overall impact on major U.S. chip makers appears limited, as the restrictions were largely anticipated and are less severe than initially feared. Analysts suggest that the measures align with expectations, with fewer suppliers to companies like Huawei being affected.
I'd like to drop one note in for everyone here that as of the recording of this, NVIDIA's market cap is still $3.4 trillion. So I think they're doing okay.
Yeah. Yeah. The cryptocurrency is not going anywhere. And the money.
Exactly.
Yeah. The spice must flow. That's what that makes me think of.
That is a fantastic phrase and a way to say it. I was going to say, Chris, something along the lines of there's always a coin miner to be installed somewhere. But,
Yes.
Nice.
All right. So researchers have uncovered new malware strains, RevC2 and Venom Loader, tied to the sophisticated threat actor known as Venom Spider. This group, also referred to as Golden Chickens, specializes in malware as a service offerings, facilitating attacks for other cybercriminal groups like Fin6 and Cobalt. RevC2 functions as a command and control tool, enabling attackers to manage infected systems remotely. Meanwhile, Venom Loader acts as an initial payload dropper designed to bypass advanced detection systems. The tools exhibit robust obfuscation techniques and modular capabilities. RevC2 is particularly notable for using encrypted communication protocols to evade interception, while Venom Loader demonstrates the ability to chain infections with other malware families. The malicious software targets enterprise environments with a focus on financial and retail sectors, aiming to exfiltrate sensitive data or deploy ransomware. So I know I moan about the naming all the time, but like Golden Chickens.
This is the second time we've actually encountered Golden Chickens. Believe it or not, there was an episode back in October where we talked about Golden Chickens laying the more egged malware. I don't know if you remember that one or not. Yeah. This is the second time we've encountered the Golden Chickens on this show, and I'm in the same boat again. Like Chris, hopefully you can picture the way I kind of conceptualize these things. But like there was someone sitting around a very serious incident response discussion, having a very serious cyber threat intelligence discussion about a very serious threat actor and pieces of malware. And someone said very seriously, we should name them Golden Chickens. And that happened. And that one just always throws me for a loop, number one. Number two, let's talk about the actual malware itself and what happens here. Very, very interesting to actually see some of these things come back up. A forever persistent hat tip over to the Zscaler Threat Lab for bringing this towards us, tools that they discovered being used in August and October of 2024. However, very interesting here is to note that these are tools that were utilized by other groups such as Fin6 and Cobalt in the past. Folks, when they say Fin6 and Cobalt in the past, we're not talking about the past couple months or so. This is actually reaching back to like 2017, 2018. So this is some pretty persistent malware that we're seeing. And I say persistent, not because it is a persistence mechanism, but the fact that it's just been around for so long. You know, some of these things like Terra Loader, Terra Stealer, Terra Cryptor, Venom Link, so on and so forth. But the big focus here is obviously RevC2. Utilizing WebSockets. Chris, I know you've got I think a little bit of detail on how it does what it does, or some of the distribution methods of it. But I'll just note for folks here that there is quite an exploit of LNK files in here. Link files, for anyone unfamiliar on Windows, are kind of like shortcut files. In this case, there's actually a little bit of API abuse as well, not in the form of web calls, but they are actually embedding this malware inside of API documentation. And I find this one to be interesting because that is not a normal phishing route or not a normal exploit route that we read about or that we hear about. Usually a lot of times it's like fake sign-in page or a drive-by download or a fake resume or so. Like we've covered like the gamut of all these things, but fake API, or maybe I should say real but weaponized API documentation, is a fantastic way to hit a very targeted crowd of this malware. And then RevC2 kicks in. It did get its name RevC2 only because there is a PDB or program database file inside of the binary that was identified, and it was being saved as C2 new. So someone is revamping their C2, but nonetheless, really interesting mechanism here. I think you've got some insight into some of the distribution methods that they've been seen using, but I'll just make a note for folks here that the capabilities of this malware, this C2, everything from stealing passwords to taking screenshots, proxying traffic, stealing cookies, and last but not least, executing shell commands as well. So quite a pretty capable C2 and definitely a lot of like, you know, adversaries would love it features in there. So definitely something to look out for. But I'll issue the same type of detection guidance I normally always do, right? Look for the lowest common denominator between this. And there's really oddly named files. There's network traffic directly to IP addresses, which is very abnormal. Use of command prompts, use of WMIC. I mean, there's all sorts of little things that do get tripped here when the malware actually runs that I recommend folks look for to detect this kind of thing.
And interestingly, the distribution methods for these tools rely on phishing campaigns with specially crafted lures, such as job offers or invoices. These emails often carry malicious links or attachments embedded with Venom Loader, setting the stage for further exploitation. Both malware strains align with MITRE attack tactics, including credential dumping and lateral movement. The emergence of these tools underscores the increasing sophistication of MaaS or malware as a service ecosystems. Analysts stress the importance of proactive defenses like behavioral analytics, endpoint detection and response solutions, and zero trust frameworks. Identifying indicators of compromise early in the attack chain remains crucial for mitigating these evolving threats. So yeah, I mean, my comment on this is like, it's nice. I don't know if it's nice, but for all the like simple crypto dumpers we've been seeing over the last couple months, it seems like the sophistication seems to be turned up in the last few episodes. So
it's like we've spent a lot of time looking at like kindergarten artwork, right? There's nothing wrong with it, but you're kind of like, man, I'd love to see a Picasso every now and then, right? You know, and then a Picasso shows up and you're like, there we go.
Yeah.
I'm not comparing malware to like Picassos. I know I just did, but I'm not saying like they should be valued as such. I'm more just bringing in the point that a lot of times we do read about like amazing entry vectors followed by coin miners, followed by like simple stuff. Now we're actually reading about complex malware being put together. I'll be careful with the word sophisticated, but I will say a little more complex for sure.
Yeah. And I really like the next one. This one was my find because, you know, AI is just everywhere in our lives right now. And I'm interested in the new kind of attack vectors that it introduces. And this one's about some recent analysis that have identified a critical vulnerability in generative AI systems termed flowbreaking, which exploits can lead to unintended data leaks. These exploits manipulate the AI's processing flow, causing it to inadvertently disclose sensitive information. The issue arises from the inherent complexity of LLMs or large language models and their integration into various applications where unanticipated interactions can be exploited by malicious actors. A notable example involves prompt injection attacks, which adversaries craft inputs that alter the AI's behavior, prompting it to reveal confidential information or perform unauthorized actions. This manipulation can occur without direct access to the underlying model, making it a potent threat in scenarios where AI systems interface with untrusted inputs. The challenge is compounded by the difficulty in predicting all possible input variations that could trigger such vulnerabilities. Yeah, so I mean, I think prompt injection is a new one, or not a new one, one that everybody should be familiar with already, but flow breaking sort of extrapolates on the idea that you can get around systems people have put in place to prevent you from prompt injecting.
Yeah, I think there's, so to break it down, this is actually some work done by the folks over at Gnostic, I think is what this is tapping into. Two types of flow breaking attacks they disclose. Chris, I'm in the same boat as you. I found these to be kind of actually fascinating to read about. One of them is a second thoughts attack. This is where a lot of times, especially in certain LLM models, you can actually see them working through the answers. And then the final thing that you get is kind of what's been guardrailed and delivered towards you. And the second thoughts attack is actually breaking outside of those guardrails and stepping outside and getting sensitive data exposed. So there might be basically an LLM decision which says, okay, based on the question, here's the answer. Oh, wait, that one piece includes sensitive information. Remove that piece. And it's kind of like going back to that original answer and being like, show me what you were hiding there, right? And that was discovered to be, or there were case studies provided for both 365 Copilot and, Microsoft 365 Copilot and ChatGPT. There's another one here, which is the stop and roll attack, which is after asking the LLM a question, if the user clicks the stop button, but the answer is still streaming, then second line data sensitivity and protection guardrails don't kick in, or at least in some cases they don't kick in. So as a result, and I view this kind of like the same, Chris, you're kind of catching it mid-process and you're either saying, all right, show me what you got right now, or go back to that earlier version. In both situations, you're taking advantage of what I'm going to call a necessary function of AI. And this is where it gets tough, right? In order to provide the answer, it might have needed access to sensitive data in which case it subsequently like then redacts that from the answer that you got, but that access might be required in order to get there. Hypothetically, I use the AI-based calendar app, and hypothetically that thing's got access to calendar, contacts, everything like that, right?
Sure.
If it needs it. But if I ask it a question, it gives me a generic answer back. Well, I'm a little torn because the answer I'm getting back doesn't include sensitive data, but I'm assuming it had to parse through sensitive data to get there.
Sure.
Right? Sensitive being my schedule and stuff, if you will. So point being, it's a tough toss-up of like, how much data do we give LLMs access to in order to get answers closer to what we actually want, right? We could go the flip side, which is give it no sensitive data, and then the humans spend so much time training the final result themselves, massaging in the sensitive stuff or massaging in the extra details, that the LLM isn't worth it anymore. So then it kind of becomes like, well, which one do we actually choose here?
Yeah. And to top it all off, we can't make them stop hallucinating. So,
and we can't stop them. We can't stop them from hallucinating. That is also correct.
I just saw an interview with the CEO of NVIDIA, and he said, "Oh, it'll take a couple more years and another $1 trillion, and then we should be able to stop the hallucinating problem." And it baffles me that we could be so far into this technology that obviously has so much promise, and we can't get the things to stop lying. So.
I view this as another like crutch we've got to depend on for a while. You've built these things, not you, Chris, obviously, but we've built these things in the industry to be so powerful that there's the hallucinations. I feel like they almost kind of they make them feel a little more human after a while, right? It's definitely a human trait. It's tough for some people to say, I don't know the answer. So you're kind of like, yeah, if we did this, and that would kind of work, right? As opposed to like the scientific, like, well, let me experiment thing. And then AI does it and it's like, oh, that's terrible. This stuff's broken. And I'm like, hold on. Like humans are pretty good at lying and fitting their way through data. Like how come when the AI does it, it's bad? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But we'll leave that moral discussion for another time.
Yeah, it could be a good episode in itself.
There we go. The worries of AI morality.
There you go. So mitigation strategies are under development, focusing on enhancing input validation and implementing robust monitoring systems to detect anomalous AI behaviors. However, the dynamic nature of AI interactions presents ongoing challenges in securing these systems. Organizations are advised to adopt a multi-layered security approach, combining technical safeguards with comprehensive user education to minimize risks associated with flow-breaking exploits. Continuous research and adaptive security measures are essential to address the evolving landscape of AI-related threats.
100%.
Yeah, I mean, I think we covered all the things there. I would just suggest anybody building public-facing AI tools or tools that are built on top of LLMs and stuff, don't give it access to sensitive data. I built some tools internally that like access our documentation and everything that's publicly available. So nothing bad's going to happen if somebody figures out how to get around the safeguards I have in place. But if you are, looking at private data on the back end of that, don't, because if somebody wants to, they'll figure out how to get through it.
Absolutely. No, great advice, Chris. And for anyone out there also using AI, be careful how much stuff you give the AI as well. I mean, what I think Chris was talking about enterprise implementations on top of maybe a trove of sensitive data. I'm talking about users out there who are just tapping into ChatGPT for a thing. Don't be handing over like secret spreadsheets and asking for, TLDRs and stuff like that, even though it may seem like it's on your computer. It's not. Yeah. And you just don't risk it. Just don't risk it. It's not the DLP conversation you want to have. That's all I'm going to say.
Awesome. Okay, Matt, you're full of good advice as always. Really appreciate you coming out and look forward to it again next week.
Likewise, always a pleasure, Chris. And just a quick reminder for everyone, we're recording this on Giving Tuesday, kicks off the holiday giving season. Please go and, donate, contribute, share in any way you can. I'll also, Chris, drop in a quick note. Normally we ask folks who listen to the show, and if you've made it this far, thank you, to reach out to us in some form. I am not promoting the platform. I just like to drop a quick note and say, you can also find Chris and myself on Blue Sky now as well, but I will leave it to the listeners to figure out what our aliases are. Hint, hint, they're pretty easy, but we'll leave that at that.
All right, folks. Have a great week, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah.